Good afternoon from Westminster City Council. You join us from the offices of Westminster City Council, where for the next half hour we'll be taking your questions to the Leader of the Council, Councillor Rachel Rowbotham. This is absolutely your session, so please send us in your questions. There's an easy way to do that in the form that comes up on your tablet or on your mobile phone. Councillor Rowbotham, thank you for your time this afternoon. Can I start with a general point? You hadn't really been leader that long before the scale of coronavirus became apparent. An incredibly daunting challenge for any leader. How do you cope?
Well, I think it's a daunting challenge for all of Westminster, actually, for the entire country. So it wasn't just necessarily me as leader. I think it was a challenging time for all of us. But right from the beginning, I've been very clear that we had three prime things that we absolutely needed to continue to do. The first was to continue to look after the most vulnerable people in our city. We provide services to the elderly, people with dementia, those living with disabilities. That absolutely had to continue. Number two, we had to keep the city moving. So we have a number of vital services like refuse collection. We can't have bin bags piling up in the streets. We had to keep city services operating. And number three, we had to do everything we can to support residents and businesses through this, because we want to have a flourishing city when we come through this. We want to be able to look forward. So we need our high streets, we need our theatre industry, and we have to therefore do everything we can to support people through this.
But as council leader, obviously you go around the streets, you talk to the residents. What's been the thing that struck you most about the reaction of the community in Westminster?
Well, undoubtedly, the thing that has struck me the most has been this fantastic outpouring of support of people wanting to help their community. When this first started, we set up Westminster Connect as a platform to enable people to volunteer and to put them in touch with people who needed help. And we had over 2,500 people who've registered. So I've joined the work myself, making meals for the homeless. Yesterday I was over at the Berkeley Hotel where they're producing 300 meals for people in sheltered housing. So there's been a fantastic community spirit of people helping others, but also local businesses doing their bit to help the community. And I think that's been fantastic.
And talking about businesses, obviously, as well as the residents you look after, the West End is here, a tremendous engine for the UK economy, which is almost at a standstill at the moment. How do you see recovery working there?
Well, I think it's going to be, I absolutely understand how tough this is for businesses. Many businesses have had to shut, so they can't even begin to operate. So we're doing everything that we can, lobbying government for more support for those businesses, but also working with them, providing advice, and doing everything that we can to enable them to continue to operate. So, for example, the government's been very clear that they wanted to relax planning regulations so that businesses could continue to do a delivery or takeaway service, whereas perhaps before they hadn't. All they need to do is inform the council that they're doing that, and then they can set up and go. And we're also looking at ways that we can, which I hope is going to go live in the next few days, publicise what local businesses are able to offer on our own website, so that people who want to find out what's happening in their local area, that what local businesses are doing in their area, can actually go to our website and see what's happening.
And can we talk a bit about grants? Of course, your council is administering the grant on behalf of the government to support business. What's the take-up been? What's the picture with money getting to businesses that need it?
Well, I was actually very pleased that Westminster was one of the first councils to get the grants out the door, which is because this is so important. It's great that the government is providing this money, but we need to turn this around as quickly as we possibly can to get the money out to people. So the vast majority of actually being processed. We've already delivered £60 million to businesses, and that's really important because businesses need the money immediately. So it's incumbent on the council to process that as quickly as they can, and I'm pleased that we've been able to do that.
So how do you see the recovery of the city stretching, say, for the next 3 to 6 months? Is there a kind of game plan, as far as one can see ahead, you're working to?
Yes. Well, we're working with all sorts of other people to look at how we can support businesses to to recover and to grow through this. So yesterday I had a meeting with the Great Estates and other major landowners in Westminster to look at how we can coordinate our efforts to how we can all support our businesses. I suspect there will be a phased reopening, but as we look through this, we need to look at how we can support it. So there might be things around local campaigning, certainly local support, but also ways that we can really boost local businesses and show that Westminster will be back open for business again when we come through this.
I'd like to come back to that, but questions are coming in from Facebook viewers now, and I'd like to start taking some of those. Peter S. asks, should we continue offering the homeless who remain on the streets food and drink? And he adds, I'm part of a church group that regularly does this.
Well, first of all, just to be clear about the rough sleepers, we recognise that Westminster clearly has always had a particularly acute problem. So we've always had a huge outreach and support service that we provide to help people come away from the streets. This is a particularly vulnerable group because of their underlying health conditions in many cases. So at the very start of this, we provided a huge amount of extra hostel and accommodation so that we could take people off the street. The most important thing that people could do is to join our efforts to encourage people to come off the streets and take advantage of that accommodation. We're providing meals, wraparound medical support, and there is enough accommodation for all of the people on our streets. It's important to emphasise that. And the safest place for those people is in accommodation, where we can provide them the support that they need.
And more questions on that theme coming in. Really, just to remind everyone watching, if you'd like to submit a question during our conversation, please do. You can do that via the entry form that you'll see on your screen on PC or on your mobile phone. A question now from Kate B on finance and how the council runs that. Kensington Chelsea Council have made an easy-to-fill-in business rates exemption grant form on their website. Will you be doing the same?
We have a whole range of facilities that are available for businesses and to enable an easy way for businesses to access that. So please just go on our website. We have the full range of information available and support there. We're also, I should mention that every business in Westminster, the 40,000 businesses in Westminster, is shortly receiving a business pack of information which will cover all aspects of what is available for them to support them from the government, but also what the local authority is doing with them. So by all means, I think we have put in place all the measures that we can to make life as easy as possible for people to access help. But I'm very happy to look at any ways that we can even improve on that further.
On transport and getting around the city, an interesting question, one I hadn't thought of, but Xavier C, forgive the name, asks, will the Santander bikes still be operating? Virus can be spread all over Westminster, and he points out he's seen families and friends using these bikes.
That's an interesting question, and obviously the bikes aren't under our control, but I think, travel around the city hasn't been stopped. People can still walk around the city. People can still ride their own bicycles around the city. What I would encourage everyone to do is to be very conscious of the social distance that they need to keep with other people. And perhaps if they're using these bikes, to make sure that they take with them some antibacterial wipes or whatever to just clean the handlebars. I think that's a very good point that Xavier raises. But actually being able to move around the city on foot or on a bicycle, people should still be able to do that as long as they're very sensible about the way they do it. And I should stress that it's important that people are able to get out and exercise, which is also part of why they would use the bicycles.
Volunteering, again, lots of questions coming in on volunteering. Paul S. just asking the very simple question, how do people volunteer to help? But could you just, for people who may not be familiar, you're using the term Westminster Connects. For anyone who's not familiar with that, what is it? What does it do? How do people help? So
Westminster Connects was a name that we just created at the beginning of this to bring together the volunteering effort underneath one platform for the council. But I'm aware there's all sorts of volunteering efforts elsewhere going on in the community, and I should stress that on our website we also have information information of all of those that we're aware of that we put on our website so that people can see on the map of Westminster what's available in their local area. But in terms of Westminster Connects, this is the council's own platform, and people can just go onto our website and register. We're sending out a weekly email every Friday, and on that email, it will have all the opportunities for volunteering on it. So, for example, this week we need people to help with the personal shopper service. We need people to help with St Mary's Paddington sewing gowns that we've developed alongside the clinicians at St Mary's, so we need help doing that. We need help for people making phone calls to those on the shielding list to help to understand if they're okay or if they need more help. So please go onto our website and register to help. We need all the help we can get in terms of helping those people who are at home and having to self-isolate and need more support. It might be just social contact. Sometimes it's just someone having a friendly voice at the other end of a telephone, or it might be helping with some shopping or anything else.
And really, can I just have a couple of examples of your own volunteering? I've seen pictures of you, I think, offering a policeman what looked like a meal on the end of a very long stick through a car window. And talk us through some of the volunteering you've done.
So that one was outside the Berkeley Hotel yesterday, and it was fantastic because they have, as well as providing 300 meals a day for people, which are being delivered by our Westminster Connects volunteers, collected from the hotel and then taken to people in sheltered housing. In addition to that, they've developed a drive-through for emergency vehicles. So I know the police are already very well aware of this, and the ambulance drivers and healthcare workers. So any emergency workers can just drive up to the outside of the hotel and be given a cup of coffee or tea or cold drink and a hot meal. And these are delicious meals. And, you know, I would remind everyone, this is a hotel that normally serves royalty.
It's a 5-star hotel.
It's a 5-star hotel, but their kitchens have now been turned over to providing these meals for the community. So what I was doing yesterday, they've devised a really ingenious way of being able to deliver the food while staying safe, and this is on the end of a pizza paddle. So that was what I was actually doing, was actually helping to serve the police using a pizza paddle. But our own canteen here in City Hall, we've turned over the canteen to producing 900 meals every single day, which go into hostels for homeless people and other people. And I've helped with that service here, which has just been fantastic. And I've been doing that alongside people from all walks of life across Westminster who have volunteered through Westminster Connects to help producing those meals, which is just great.
And how do people interested in that? Is the link on the website? How do you get to that?
The link is on the website. Please just click on that and register. And once you're registered, you will receive a weekly email every Friday, and it will set out the opportunities to volunteer, what the specific things are, and just click on those that you feel you're able to do and how you're able to help. So it's as simple as that. We will, once you register on our website, we will send you an email every Friday, and it will have the opportunities for how you can help.
And for anyone who hasn't seen the link, simply go to the Council's main website, which is www.westminster.gov.uk. Two questions now on a similar theme on the environment, really back to the issue of homeless. Janina S. is asking, do you think it's time you took further restrictions in parks? And she cites as examples they're closing benches, bedding gardens, toilets and so on within areas like Paddington Recreation Ground. And that obviously, I'm sure, takes us into the territory of social distancing and whether people obey the rules or not. Do you want to tighten up? Do you think people have shown they can behave or not?
This is a really important one, and it really goes to the heart of how we support people in the city. Social distancing and following the guidelines is absolutely critical. But also, it is absolutely vital that people have access to open spaces. We know in an inner city area like Westminster, a lot of people live in high-rise flats. They need to be able to get out. They need to be able to use parks and open spaces. So we have been really clear that we want to keep those spaces open. We've also been clear that we want to not restrict use of the benches, because if you're an elderly person, someone with a small child, you might need to sit down and rest in between, during your walk. So there are very valid reasons why people might need to rest during their walk, and we understand that. However, we've been really clear, and we've put up very large signs outside the spaces, I'm sure she'll have seen, that people must follow the guidelines. Don't congregate on the benches, don't congregate on the grass. Please follow these guidelines. We want to absolutely keep our green spaces open, but we need residents to work with us. We need them to follow the guidelines so that we're able to keep them open.
How to keep on the subject of people who aren't following the guidelines. Dominic P. says, Councillor Robotham, I'm still hearing parties and gatherings in my building, but the message isn't being communicated in your daily updates.
Well, that's an interesting one, and I'll take that away, and we can certainly increase the messaging around it. I think the government and the council have been absolutely clear what people need to do, but I'm very happy to keep reiterating the message because it's so important.
And the council's noise, important to say, the council's noise services still work. Those services work as normal in this period.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Again, on gathering and people gathering, Bianca C. says, I know people on the streets have been waiting 2 weeks to get help. And she cites the case of nearly 200 homeless people in Soho Square every day. So is it possible there are groups of people that we don't know about that are still waiting for help?
They aren't. There's no one that I'm aware of that is still waiting for help. Our outreach teams are out working across Westminster the whole time. I think what has been happening is that because Westminster's been on the front foot, that we have made the accommodation available, that we have very good services. More people are coming into Westminster, and that's happening quite frequently. So what we are finding is there's a cohort that we're very familiar with, that we've been working with for a long time to try and persuade them to come off the streets. But every day we're finding that new people come in. So it's not the case that we're not out there, not working with them, not trying to persuade them to come off the streets and into the accommodation which we have available. But it is the case that very often we find new people are coming in.
On that theme, I'm afraid there's one of the viewers isn't convinced by that, councillor, but Julia D. She says, there are homeless people on the streets of Westminster. Charities themselves have told me, Julia, they shouldn't be. Why haven't they been helped?
I'm absolutely clear that we have the help available for everyone. We are housing more people than ever before. We have the accommodation available. The people who are still on the streets are either the very entrenched cohort. There's about a cohort of about 50 that we know very well who refuse all offers of help, and short of enforcing, which the police would need to do, we can't take them off the streets. We continue to work with them. We continue to try and do everything we can to persuade them to come off the streets. But that's where we are with that group. But also, as I was saying, there is movement. There's movement in and out of the borough, but particularly in Westminster, we do see movement coming into the borough. So I know there are people on our streets on any one day who have moved into the streets. So it is a continuing challenge for us. I know that.
And this is obviously a group who will congregate naturally by the nature of what they do. It may not be that amenable sometimes to not doing that. It must be a very difficult task to happen. Probably.
It's a very difficult task, and our outreach workers, we have been increasingly finding that there's been more aggressive behaviour. I think as the streets have emptied, there's been much more aggressive begging and more intimidating behaviour. So, and clearly a number of these people are displaying symptoms. So it's been even more challenging.
On the environment, last one on the environment for a little bit, but Martin K asks, will you be taking action on fly tipping? Have you noticed any upsurge in tipping, litter, graffiti, anything like that?
Actually, this is an interesting one because I know from the press that other boroughs elsewhere, and talking to some of my London counterparts, that they have found fly tipping is occurring. But I think the difference is we haven't experienced that in terms of an increase. We've always had some issues around it, which we deal with, and we continue to deal with. But because we've kept our bulky household waste service going, it means that residents who want to actually be able to access that service are still able to do so. In other boroughs, I know they've shut that, and so that's perhaps leading to an increase in fly tipping elsewhere. But certainly our refuse collection is continuing to operate at pretty much near normal levels, which is really important. It's really important from a hygiene and safety standpoint. And also, of course, to emphasise that because so many businesses in the West End have closed, we've been able to redeploy some of that capacity into the residential areas. So actually residents should find that their refuse collection service is still continuing to operate really well, I hope. But certainly if they have instances of fly tipping, continue to report it to us in the normal way.
Well, let's take something slightly lighter for a moment. Francesca says, I'm a big fan of West End Live. Do you think there's a chance it will be rescheduled for later in the year? And that's obviously one of your big landmark events.
Well, Francesca, I'm also a great fan of West End Live, and I'm absolutely determined that we will reschedule it later in the year. This is a bit of a movable feast because clearly we don't know exactly when the lockdown will occur. But I think West End Live is really important, and it's going to be particularly important at a time like this to showcase the fabulous theatre and musical offering that we've got in a city like Westminster. You know, we've got these amazing shows, and I think part of coming through this and showing the support that we need to business, and to be able to show that Westminster will be able to get back on its feet, and our theatre area to get back on its feet and encourage people to come back. Things like West End Live will be really important for that. So, Francesca, I'm with you. I think it's a fabulous thing, and certainly we will do everything we can to have it later in the year.
Well, we've been talking, people have been going on to westminster.gov.uk, which is good news. However, Kate B needs some help. She says, I've just emailed the address regarding business rates and it's a 10-day turnaround. Can you please ensure electronic contact with business? And I think by that she means some quicker electronic way of talking to business.
Well, thank you, Kate. That's really important that you've highlighted that. Let me take that away, absolutely, and look at that. We absolutely want to be turning things around as quickly as we can, and we'll do everything to do that.
Two issues on the environment and antisocial behaviour, which is obviously something of great concern to a lot of people watching. A very general question first from Anna T, who says, I'm worried about a vulnerable neighbour. What can I do?
Well, first of all, please get in touch with us, Westminster Connect, so we can actually then get in touch with that person or ask her to contact us. Either way. The important point about this is that when we make contact with them, we will then be able to triage them. It could be that they need a much greater level of care if they're very vulnerable, in which case we will transfer them across into our own adult social care department to be able to make an assessment. They'll do that over the phone to assess whether that person perhaps needs a higher level of care, but otherwise we'll be able to identify what sort of care and support they need. It might be just a question of someone being able to help them with meals or shopping or medicine delivery. It might be that they're just really lonely. You know, we knew before this that we had a problem with our older community in an area like Westminster, where many older people live on their own in terms of social isolation. So that's just been exacerbated at a time like this, and we really need to be aware of that.
Still on back to antisocial behaviour, which has been something of a theme. Murray M is asking about Inverness Terrace, where he says major issues with rough sleepers and antisocial behaviour. Is that something you're aware of? Is that something the council is acting on?
I'm absolutely aware of that, and I know there've been issues there. What I would say is to reassure Murray that we're absolutely aware of this. We've put extra support in place on that, and we're also working very closely with the police around this. So yes, I'm very well aware of that, and we're working as hard as we can to deal with that.
Westminster Connects, we were talking about a moment ago, may be able to help with this. David M is asking, what assistance can the council give for food shopping for over 70s? Is that something Westminster Connects can do for them?
Absolutely, Westminster Connects can do for them. So we've got I think it's 370 volunteers linked into the food shopping service, just so that people know. So how this operates, we have a distribution centre in the north and one in the south. They go every morning and do the actual food shop, and then they will deliver that to the residents. There's no payment that needs to change hands with the volunteer. I think that's very important to give people reassurance, because there's been some comments in the press about scams and things elsewhere. The shoppers have a prepaid card. Then for those who are able to pay, they will be given a receipt of the cost of their shopping, and they will then and details of how they can pay that to the council, either by cheque or by going online, and all of the details for that will be on the on their delivery shop with the receipt of how much has been paid. So please, Westminster Connects is there for you. We've got an army of volunteers, which is fantastic. So no one needs to worry about personal shopping.
A couple of other quick questions now as time is beginning to run out. We have a lot of people want to put points to you. Obviously, the subject of care homes has been massive in the news this week for all sorts of reasons. Very straightforward question from JG asking, are care homes in Westminster getting the PPE equipment they need? Can you give an assurance on that?
They are. So I can give an assurance. This has been a really challenging area. I think it's fair to say that across London, across the country, it's been a challenging area. But I can assure them that now we are getting the PPE that we need, which is really important. So all of our care workers, absolutely in our care homes, but also in home care, those that are going into the homes of the most vulnerable, they all have PPE, and we're able to access that.
James L. asking, again, this is, I think, probably a website business question. James L., I'm a Westminster resident and also a business owner with an office in Soho. My business is entitled to a £10,000 grant, but I haven't received one. Can we help James?
Well, I think he must be one of the last percentage we've got. I think we've delivered. I think we've now processed. It's almost 80% of the grants. So I'm assuming that he will be in the last ones. I can assure him that he will be receiving that very shortly.
Genevieve R is asking, how are you supporting care leavers? She believes support has been dropped for care leavers. Is there anything you can say about that?
No, support hasn't been dropped for care leavers. All of our services around both vulnerable in terms of the very elderly and those living with disabilities, but also the young, have actually absolutely remained in place. And it's important to stress that, which is very important, is that our staffing levels have remained at a really good level. So officers are continuing to resource those services extremely well, and we haven't reduced the service at all.
Of course, we've talked about a lot of the big services that people expect councils to run and see every day, bins, parks, all those sorts of things. Registrar services, again, this is possibly more into human interest territory. Carmen G is asking, how soon will registrar services become available, including giving notices of intention and marriage services?
That's a very good question. I have to admit I don't know the answer to that because it will depend on when we start to move out of this lockdown. But what I can give the assurance of is that as soon as we do know when we're going to be able to move out of this period, then we'll put more information on our website about that.
And this is a point from Kate G, which I think classes perhaps more as fan mail than it does as a question to you. As Kate G says, as a Westminster resident, I'm really grateful that not only that services continue uninterrupted, but that the standard is so high. Recycling team fab. So Kate is clearly a fan of our recycling team.
Well, I'm really glad she's brought that up because actually our contracted provider, Veolia, have been doing a fantastic job. And it's really important. You know, in a city like Westminster, very few people have gardens or other areas where they can store rubbish. So actually being able to have their recycling and refuse collected is really important. People can't store it in their own homes and we don't want it piling up on the streets. So I think the fact that we've been able to keep that service going is really important, and I'm grateful to her for her comments.
You talk about Veolia and recycling there, which leads us neatly to Martin Kay's question. He says, more information on waste management is needed so people are encouraged to recycle and not put tissues and PPE in recycling. What can you do to reassure Martin?
Well, I think what Martin's saying is absolutely right. I would say it's not just about at the moment, actually. This is a piece of work that we're doing as a longer-term piece of work, but it's very relevant about how we increase awareness of what can and can't be recycled and to improve our recycling rates. This is a really key part of our work to tackle climate change, is to improve recycling rates, and exactly what he's saying in terms of information about what can and can't be recycled is part of that. Specifically in terms of masks, etc., we can put information on that much more quickly in our daily emails. We're sending out daily emails to all of our residents. Anyone on the council tax or business rates register will be getting a daily email from us. And so we can certainly put more information about those specific items in there.
Bianca C is back with a second question. How can we speed up registration for accommodation of the homeless? You talked about the fact that the teams are out talking to people, encouraging them to move this accommodation. Presumably is there any way you can actually speed it up? Is it always an involved process? How does that work?
It's remarkably quick. So I'm interested in her question around that. I wonder whether that might be to do with homeless, as in people who are not on the streets, but other people who are needing housing. But in terms of the registration for people who are rough sleeping to get them into accommodation, that's happening remarkably quickly.
I'm afraid, Councillor, we're out of time for questions at this point, but can I ask you to conclude with a finishing thought on the way ahead for Westminster and what you think the legacy of this whole experience might be?
Well, I think there are challenges, and it's going to take a while for us to return to normal. But one of the positives about this, I think, is the legacy that has come out of the community support. It's just been fantastic. And I think for us as a community, for us as a city, it's brought us closer together. People are out there helping everyone else. And I think that's a very strong legacy of support that we need to build on. But certainly for our business community, for our residents, I want to assure them that we are doing everything that we can to support them through this, and so that we can actually all return to the thriving, wonderful city that we know as Westminster.
Thank you, Councillor. That's all we have time for this afternoon. Can I say thank you to everyone who's put questions in. Apologies to anyone who put a question and didn't get through, but this is the kind of format an interactive session we'll be doing more of. But until we meet for the next time, good afternoon from Westminster City Council.